I'm going to tell a story, and I'm just going to come out and say it that this is not easy for me. This is going to be long, and the algorithm is not going to like it. But that's not what this is about anymore. It's about the state of our country, and I have a personal story to tell that's relevant to what's happening now. And I think I'll lose followers. People have an idea of who they think you are, and then when you don't match that, they leave, and I get it. I've done it to some people I was following as well. And then, of course, the trolls will love it. I'm just going to end up reading this. I wrote this. It's on Substack if you want to see the whole thing. But in order to get through this, I'm just going to read it. And so forgive me for just looking down to be able to look at what I wrote and share that with you. It does come with a trigger warning because this writing shares stories and uses words that some may find triggering or offensive. So please just take care of yourself however you need to. So my reasons for not sharing my personal life have little to do with fear of losing followers or what the trolls will do with that information. It is simply who I am. And if you have followed me for a while, I'm sure you noticed that I am somewhat private. You may be surprised to hear that I have gone through some things during my time on social media, especially these past 2 years, that almost broke me to the point that I have come perilously close on more than one occasion to deleting everything and retreating to my gardens and now my chickens. And it is during those times that I leave here for a day or two or sometimes weeks because self-isolation is my response to hard things. I know it's a trauma response and I'm putting things in place to finally, at almost 65 years old, I can't believe I'm saying that, I'm trying to heal that part of me. With time and inner work and moving through those seasons of doing the hard things, I am feeling the pull to show up with a deeper vulnerability and allowing you in to not only see those broken parts, but to share my story, especially those things that have a deep, meaningful impact on who I am today. But this is not easy for me. If self-isolation is my response to hard things, vulnerability feels like an enemy, violent even. It doesn't come naturally. It feels like a trickster, waiting to blindside me as people pick apart my words and poke at the tender parts. If that feels pathetic reading it, it sounds even more so speaking it. I could easily stop here and say, just screw it. None of this is worth it. I've gotten by just fine as I am all these years. What's wrong with self-isolation and cocooning until the storm passes? It's worked for me up until now. But welcome to a peek into the mind of a woman still protecting her inner child. This child learned years ago that trusting some people led to being hurt, and being hurt means the risk is too great. That mindset has sustained me for decades, but that armor is heavy, and I am older, a little wiser, and a lot tired of holding up shields to keep truly amazing people at bay. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I do hear the words of Brene Brown, who said, vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. And I just absolutely suck at it. So speaking of Brene's wisdom, I read Daring Greatly years ago, and I recall marking that book up, dog-earing more pages than not, then tossing the book aside, never to think of it again. But recently I've been thinking about Brene's teachings after I listened to her interview on a podcast, and she repeated what she says about vulnerability. That vulnerability is not weakness, but a measure of courage. That the willingness to stand in uncertainty and risk in the raw exposure of being seen takes a strength that is terrifying yet rewarding. That vulnerability is the birthplace of everything tender and alive in us. This is where belonging, joy, and the quiet bravery of authenticity live. That we wear our armor well. Perfectionism, numbness, the need to control too much and reveal too little. That being vulnerable doesn't mean we spill ourselves to everyone, but to offer our unguarded heart to those who have earned the holding of it and trust one's story will find its way to the ones who need to hear it, the ones with whom it resonates, the ones who can sit with the grief, the joy, the life lessons. It's all this and so much more. And I know Brene is right, but until recently, I've lacked the emotional maturity, the desire, or even the need to implement any of it, or at least I thought so. And I know that sounds like a hypocrite, because how else can I explain that I, as a person with close to 1 million followers across platforms, also have a paralyzing fear of being vulnerable. So why now? Why am I inviting vulnerability to the front row? Why do I want to share more about my life now? Why now do I feel it is the right time to tell you things I've never discussed publicly? Why now is this the right thing to do when vulnerability feels like a trapdoor that I keep circling while I feel the tug of self-isolation beckoning me to retreat into its comfort and safety? Why now? Well, first, I'm tired. I am really tired. I'm tired of carrying the armor that I regularly hide behind. What I've come to understand is that the armor grew something else behind it. For some, it's called imposter syndrome. But really, it's the same wound of trauma masking itself, setting out landmines if I get too close to achieving a goal or a dream. This is a hard admission, but here it is. For years, I have feared that the version of me people admire isn't the true one, isn't really who I am. That if they ever saw the me underneath everything, they'd find a fraud. Writing that takes me back to a time when a member of my family, successful in their career and personal life, said to me, "Carla, sometimes I feel like I don't deserve the praise people give me. Do you ever feel like that?" Never have words struck me so deeply. I looked into their eyes and I was carried back to childhood, to the place where their story collided with mine, where they too carried the same wounds from the same people and the same events that no child should ever endure. It scars a child deeply and creates chaos in developing minds that are trying desperately to understand how the one who says they love you is the one harming you. Eventually, loving words and actions are viewed with suspicion because they almost always come with unimaginable pain and suffering. The end result, at least for me, has been a woman whose inner child shoots up warning flares when someone is nice, kind, caring, loving, or grateful for something I did, thankful for my teachings, or so on and on and on. If reading this makes you uncomfortable, imagine the discomfort I'm experiencing writing it. Like many aspects of deconstructing, this is a paradox too, because mixed in my discomfort is relief in my acknowledging the weariness and maybe for once believing that I deserve the love my family, close friends, and many of you so freely give to me. Another reason why now is I'm in awe of the courage it takes to share stories of betrayal and grief, as well as joy and peace. I've witnessed glow-ups and watched people thrive as they bring us along to celebrate or mourn or be completely pissed off together. It's such an honor to hold this space as women trust their voices to flow through the mystical waves of social media and we find each other. Even when trolls try desperately to suffocate that experience, the connection somehow rises above it all to a space where love, empathy, compassion, inspiration, sorrow, healing, and wisdom are found. It's beautiful, it's sacred, and it's even holy. But that's the trap I keep circling, and I've been doing it my entire life. Isolation protects me from the vulnerability that might finally disprove the fear. The only proof that I'm worthy of being known comes from being known, and that's exactly the risk my mind has prevented me from taking. The very closeness that could heal me is the thing I've spent a lifetime running from. Still, those who are doing it are giving me a roadmap. I too have stories to share and insights to offer. They demand a level of vulnerability that terrifies me, but I'm inspired to step into this moment because of those I see who have walked through fires worse than mine and are showing up bravely, honestly, vulnerably. This moment does require this level of bravery, honesty, and vulnerability for those of us who are leading the way. And that brings me to my final reason for why now. It's because our democracy is at risk. Opening up my news app feels like dodging hot coals falling from the sky. News story after news story about another lie, another corrupt scheme that benefits Trump and his family, another appointee devoted to Trump instead of the U.S. citizens, our president hiding in a food carrier truck and being whisked away while people like Caroline Leavitt are left behind as useful decoys. Speaking of Caroline, did she know that this was the plan before she boarded Air Force One? Did she willingly put her life on the line for the man she gleefully spins lies for daily? Were her newborn and toddler on her mind as their plane took off without knowing if the purported shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles would annihilate her and her fellow passengers. I'll ponder that in another teaching soon about Caroline. And for those of you who will invariably ask, I'm not obsessed with Caroline, but she is incredibly useful in understanding the willingness of white Christian women who will defend Christian patriarchy because they are addicted to the privilege and the power it affords them. All of this chaos and insanity are, as CNN's Jake Tapper so famously said, a hot mess inside a dumpster fire, inside a train wreck. It's all by design, by perpetrators from Stephen Miller and Elon Musk to the Heritage Foundation to keep us confused and paralyzed. For some people, it's working. People don't know where to turn and who to trust. I began calling this out before Trump descended the golden elevator to announce his candidacy for president. So I've been in this space as a voice many of you have come to trust. And when I go silent, many of you reach out, reminding me that the work I do is valuable, needed even. You ask me to comment on matters. You tag me in videos to ensure I see something, and you reach out to make sure I'm okay. Believe me, beautiful souls, when I tell you that it is all so meaningful. I'm touched by the love you send my way, but when the demon rises, convincing me that my voice doesn't matter or that I'm too broken to deserve a following that trusts me, or overwhelm compels me to push back from my keyboard, I am finding it increasingly challenging to claw my way back to you, to the light. And there it is. The endless, exhausting loop that I was describing in point 1 as to why now. But here it is in point 3 of my why now, which I guess is the point of all of this. The exhaustion informs my healing, and my healing lies in embracing and loving the me that you see and love. It is indeed all interconnected and brings me back to point 3, because there is one law that Donald Trump is desperate to see passed. If it does, it will ensure that literally millions of registered U.S. voters are stripped of their constitutional right to vote. It is clearly an attempt to steal any election going forward, ensuring that only candidates endorsed by Stephen Miller, Musk, and the Heritage Foundation get elected. That would result in a further deterioration of human rights, with an extremely high probability that we would become a police state run by Christian extremists with views so radical that no woman would vote. Single mothers would be punished. Historically marginalized people would be dehumanized, and their perverted version of Christianity would be mandated in education, business, media, and in homes. As my beautiful friend Danny says, it is deeply concerning. Some would argue it's terrifying, but labeling it terrifying would lead some to believe the only action is to run away from it, and I refuse to do so. I have a voice and influence in a platform large enough to make waves that will join others in creating waves, and it becomes the tsunami for change that is needed to take down this threat to our freedom and our rights. This work requires a level of authenticity and vulnerability that I have witnessed in others but have turned away from because, well, see everything else I've said before now. But when I think of the millions of people who will lose their right to vote if the Save America Act passes, I'm filled with a level of rage that I have rarely felt. But each time that I have felt it, I know it is because my soul recognizes an injustice so egregious, so heinous, so inarguably corrupt and unconscionable that I must act. I have turned that rage into action, transforming situations into something good. In the past, it has compelled me to take on family members at the risk of losing them forever to stand up for those being harmed. It gave me the laser focus to put a plan in place that launched a successful nonprofit, saving thousands of cats and dogs from euthanasia. It has given me the courage to be the advocate for those I love who were struggling with life-threatening challenges when the medical community wouldn't listen. And it has given me the unique gift and clarity to see the understory in events, which I then turn into writings and teachings, and I offer them to you. So yeah, I can do hard things with passion and conviction. That is, until I just can't. But the time has come to once and for all silence the doubter who convinces me my work doesn't matter, the saboteur who whispers my writing must be perfect lest the grammar police attack me, and lastly, the inner child who insists I remember the risk of being hurt by tricksters is too great and it's time to retreat. I can't promise I won't do it again, because the concept of never doesn't belong on a journey to healing. But I'm laying it out here in a way that would make an editor cringe, pleading with me to shorten this because I risk boring you. And if that's you and you're bored, but you've made it this far, thank you so much, and you are dismissed. But for the rest of you who want to continue on, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I'm so grateful for you. You get it, and I absolutely love you for that. This work of believing in oneself when one has spent a lifetime battling self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, and self-worth is excruciatingly hard. But I'm still here, still typing, because the Save America Act deserves every ounce of the rage I want to unleash upon it. With the laser focus, intensity, wisdom, and passion I have brought to every situation where an injustice was so egregious it deserved the full weight of righteousness to annihilate it. Righteousness belongs to the people, not to the ones in control of systems they created to keep themselves in power. Now, if you're reading this and concluding that I'm overreacting because 1, you need an ID to buy liquor, and 2, doesn't everyone want free and fair elections? I'm going to say this deep from my reverent heart. I'm going to kneel down and I'm going to hold your hands and I'm going to look straight into your eyes and I'm going to take a deep breath and with as much passion as I can say to you, fuck you. And beautiful soul, we're not even to the part where I think you will unfollow me. Now, you needn't worry that I'm going to make habits of using those kinds of words, but at a time when a sitting president of the United States spews F-bombs like sprinkles on ice cream, and a member of Congress says to Dr. Anthony Fauci, who the fuck do you think you are? It's time for those of us who were taught to tisk curse words as ungodly to understand that rules for thee and not for me is the reason those in power believe they are above reproach while the rest of us are judged harshly. What I'm really trying to say is that if you do believe that I am overreacting, then you have either fallen victim to the lies and propaganda about the SAVE Act, are wantonly ignorant, and it's just easier to let white Christian men lead and you'll just blindly follow, or you are supportive of people losing their right to vote, which, if you are a woman who has ever changed your name for any reason, means you too are at risk of losing your right to vote. And to that last point, if men like Pete Hegseth and his misogynistic spiritual advisor, Doug Wilson, have anything to do with it, all women will lose their right to vote anyway. As I type that sentence, I just feel my rage boiling. I literally cannot believe anyone believes that women losing their right to vote makes their God happy. But oh well, be blessed, as their favorite shirt and coffee mugs say. I'm going to forgive myself for the heavy sarcasm and cursing contained herein. But alas, we have reached the point where I am going to set down all my armor and step fully into vulnerability. Because you see, it is that last point where my last name has changed, and it changed again, and it changed again. I gotta have water. This is where I tell you more in hopes that it brings home how gravely dangerous the Save America Act is. Miss this, and millions of women, adoptees, people who have changed their names for any reason will lose their right to vote. It isn't just about a driver's license. That isn't enough. It isn't even about real ID. That will not save you. It isn't as simple as telling voters to get passports. It costs money that millions cannot afford. It's about people like me who did nothing more than navigate life as best they could, being punished for having that life. People like me, and it's just a guess, but probably some of you as well. The next part. Real life teen mom. No one is truly prepared for marriage at 17 years old. At least I wasn't. Being pregnant at 16 years old, married at 17 while a senior in high school, and a mother before my 18th birthday wasn't a really well thought out plan. That part was so hard to write for me when I wrote this out because my senses were completely on overload. But I was determined to finish that writing, even though it took me weeks, just as it's taken me hours to record this video. I'm simply struggling for how to share a story from when I was 16 years old to 64 in one writing without it being outrageously long, which it ended up being anyway, and filled with things that some people might think are irrelevant, but it all feels important to me. Somewhere between the struggle of I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor, and how do I share without sounding as if life is full of regrets, the answer to the first question is damn right. And the second is, well, how can there be any regrets to my life when it brought me the greatest blessings of my life, which are my children? Now, they would no doubt say that they would have been better off without a teen mom, and they're absolutely correct. But more importantly, they would have been better off if I had understood how much trauma I had carried from an absent father and abusive family members, as well as a friend of the family. Yes, it's plural. Family members. That will shock some of you who know my story and those who have paid attention to the clues I've offered in other things I have said in the past. And I don't want to share any more at this point, and I'm not sure I ever will. But I share a little here because it has relevancy to how deep some of these scars are, because holding on to victimhood isn't my end goal. Living free from the bondage of childhood trauma so that I can love myself as deeply as I deserve is the end goal. So there are a few who would disagree with the statement that teen pregnancy and or marriage isn't the best idea. But if you are one of those rare ones who married as a teenager and are still thriving in that marriage, my best to you. I mean that sincerely. The merits of teen marriage aren't what this video is about, but we also have solid data along with lived experiences of millions of teen brides who would confirm that waiting would be wiser. Some would argue, and do so with conviction, that the growing trend of women choosing to remain single is a better option. It would have been for me after my first marriage failed 7 years in. And I recall someone saying, 7 years is a long time. At least you showed you tried. But at 24, single with 2 kids, making $7.25 an hour, it felt like an immense failure. So it's probably not surprising that desperation and inner child wounds convinced me that a quick rebound marriage would be an excellent idea. But not surprisingly, it wasn't. And 5 years later, with me and my children now carrying more wounds, I left. The love of my third child, whom we adopted during that marriage, transcends the regrets of those years. And all of that was so long ago. Decades even. But with each proverbial turn of the page of my life story, a new chapter came with a new name. I knew 2 divorces would stigmatize me because welcome to Christian patriarchy, where men are celebrated for their conquests and women are slut-shamed for having a past that doesn't match June Cleaver's. I recall being contacted sometime after my second divorce by a high school classmate, and she was looking for the contact information for one of our other classmates so she could send information about an upcoming class reunion. She said our classmate's name slowly and sarcastically. And she said her first name, and then she added her 3 surnames. I mean, I could literally hear her smiling through the phone as she said Marissa Braxton, then Jenkins, then McNally, and now Priestley. Obviously, that's not her real name. And I remember thinking, as she said those words, I thought, oh yeah, I forgot what a bitch she was in high school. Not the person who had been married 3 times, but the person I was talking to. And I lied and told her I didn't have her contact information, even though I did. And then I didn't attend our class reunion. Years later, thinking about that experience, I can see it for what it is. That person is a tiny, irrelevant human, miserable with her own life, who found great pleasure in other people's discomfort. I also remember how loyal she was to her Christianity. That's a side note, and I didn't write that part, but I think it's important. And I'm sharing it here because it affirmed what I already knew about myself. People actually were looking down at me, and I was right to be ashamed. And as I think about the feelings of judgment that I laid upon myself at being 16 and pregnant, that cascaded into not so great decisions, I wonder why it never occurred to me to forgive myself and see myself deserving of grace and love. And that feels like a good journaling prop that I'll use for some deep inner work. Okay, sometime between then and now, I got it right. It's not perfect, but right enough to have just celebrated 32 years together, 8 grandchildren from our blended family of 6 kids. And anybody who has been married this long knows you don't do it without work. Really hard, soul-wrenching, soul-searching, life-changing work. And our story deserves so much more than what I'm sharing here. But remember, the vulnerable part I'm sharing today is lovingly embracing who I am by sharing all of this. All the parts of me, the broken, the silly, the insightful, the overly responsible, the irresponsible, the problem solver, the rescuer, the silent sufferer, the wise, the painfully introverted, also known as an INFJ, or if you're into Clifford Strengths, I want absolutely nothing to do with woo. And if you know, you know. And so, in case you lost count, that's 2. 2 divorces, 3 marriages, 4 surnames, and the last one being Camstra. So there it is. But that is only part of my story because, like I said, that writing took weeks to write. And all I just need to say is I am twice divorced and thrice married. And I also want to share with you that there's some wounds from my past that have remained open for far too long. They have kept me from loving myself and believing I deserve to be loved. I have much work to do, and it would be an honor to take you on this journey with me, understanding that you need to prioritize your own self-care when necessary. So if you've been paying attention in this video, you will see that my why now for this story is only partly answered. The other part is the part about our democracy being at risk. Going back to those people who are willfully and wantonly ignorant about the SAVE Act because they believe that this act is about reducing voter fraud. That is a lie. As many critics of the SAVE Act have said, this act fixes a problem that does not exist. Even data from the Heritage Foundation, the one that brought us Project 2025, confirms that fraudulent votes are so rare that it doesn't impact election outcomes. So if election fraud is rare and non-citizen voting is even rarer, then what's the real reason for the SAVE Act? It's about voter intimidation and disenfranchisement. This intimidation goes far beyond putting ICE agents at polling stations to intimidate Black and brown voters legally registered and eligible to vote. This is about making the hoops this act would force people to jump through to prove citizenship impossible, inconvenient, and expensive. So now we're going to shift into what you need to know about the real ID, because that is the biggest catch about the Save America Act. Many people assume the SAVE Act simply requires voters to prove their identity through a real ID. That assumption is not only wrong, it is dangerous. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Real ID is a federally compliant state-issued driver's license or identification card, and it features a star marking at the top. That ID is now required to board domestic flights and enter federal buildings that require a higher level of security clearance. The Real ID was a direct response to a suggestion by the 9/11 Commission due to the terrorists using fake IDs and inconsistent identification procedures among state regulations. Now, the rollout of the Real ID law was very slow, and that gave states time to comply with its requirements. And in 2025, TSA enforcement took effect. That means that to fly commercially within the United States, passengers had to present a driver's license or state-issued identification card featuring that Real ID star indicating that the passenger had verified their identity. But here's where it gets even more complicated because of the language inside the SAVE Act. A Real ID is offered in every state, but it is not a mandatory requirement to have a Real ID. Many people opt out of Real IDs because they don't need one. This is where it gets even more complicated because only 5 states offer what they call an enhanced driver's license that validates that citizen is a legal citizen of the United States. Those 5 states are Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Vermont, and Washington. Now notice those 5 states border Canada, making it more convenient for those who likely travel to and from Canada for employment, family, etc. So to be clear, unless you live in one of those 5 states and opted for that enhanced driver's license, your real ID does not serve as proof of citizenship. Now let's go read the language that's in the SAVE Act. Here's what it says, quote, "A form of identification issued consistent with the requirements of the Real ID Act of 2005 that indicates the applicant is a citizen of the United States." Go back to what I just said. Only 5 states have the enhanced driver's license. So in other words, should the SAVE Act pass, do not think that you will simply show up at your designated precinct on election day with your real ID in hand and assume you're going to vote. Most of us do not have proof of citizenship indicated on our real ID identification cards. And if you think it's going to be as easy as bringing your birth certificate or whatever other documentation you have to prove citizenship, we need to think again, because if you are like millions of Americans whose names have changed, like mine, over their lifetime, documentation supporting those name changes may be a requirement. Now, the House version of this act currently says that an affidavit explaining the name changes will suffice. But understandably, I'm suspicious. This act fixes a problem that doesn't exist. So again, what is the real reason behind it? And how in the world is it going to be implemented before the midterms? Let's just pause here and consider that, because what isn't clear here is how states will be required to prove citizenship. Imagine the bottleneck of chaos this creates surrounding elections. Or is that the goal? You might think this is a gross exaggeration of the pandemonium it will cause, but consider anything this administration attempts to do. I mean, it's always a complete and absolute mess. And then tell me where I'm wrong, because what isn't clear is how the SAVE Act will be enforced. But what is clear, however, is that Trump wants it in place before the midterms in November, and it's just weeks away, leading many of us to conclude that this is about creating chaos and ensuring that people will either be exasperated because they can't find the documents they need and give up, or Trump loyalists will deny eligible voters their right to vote because of the confusion surrounding the real ID and how to prove citizenship. Now let's talk about passports. For those who will say people just need to get their passports to prove their citizenship, I will say you have either forgotten what it means to struggle financially or you never have. Passports take time, money, and resources to track down documentation. If the goal is to secure U.S. elections and the right to vote is protected under the Constitution of the United States, which it is, then obtaining a passport should also be a right citizens should be able to expect assistance with. Instead, in some cases, it's virtually impossible. Even for me, a woman with the resources and time available to chase down all the documentation I needed to prove who I was for my real ID and passport. Because of my name changes from many years ago, the first challenge was that my records were archived and existed in different counties. Although I was fortunate that most of my records were in Indiana except my birth certificate, there is a huge difference in how counties keep records. And there is also a major difference in how staff treat requests. Some staff were very helpful and accommodating. Others were the kind of government employees who shouldn't be working as government employees who serve the public, and I know you know who I'm talking about. They literally look for ways to sabotage your request instead of being helpful. In one case, after repeatedly calling and being told that my request for records from the 80s was unreasonable and time-consuming, I drove 2 hours to another county, stood in line for hours to finally get copies of my records. Now consider someone you know who is struggling to make ends meet. Applying for a passport would be unimaginable if it were between that and not missing work to put food on the table. Finding a way to track down needed documentation could also prove impossible. And get this, if you have proven your citizenship to satisfy the requirements under the SAVE Act, you may be required to reprove your citizenship if you change your address. All of this for the right to vote, to fix a problem that does not exist. You must see it now. Regardless of what you think of me, my past, and my struggle with vulnerability, in the bigger picture, none of that matters. I have a passport, and you're damn right, I will be voting in the midterms. But what about the millions who do not? Are we really okay with suffocating the voices of millions of Americans because Trump is spewing a lie about our elections and his extremist Christian loyalists are happy to go along with it? Are we really okay with this being the beginning of the end for women and other people who are at risk of losing their right to vote? Tell me I'm overreacting, and I will remind you that Pastor Doug Wilson, the one Pete Hegseth calls his spiritual advisor and believes that women should only be seen as birthing vessels and nothing more, is hell-bent on women losing their right to vote. That Fox News platformed Dr. Mark Siegel, who lamented that the decline in teen pregnancy is a problem because not enough babies are being born. This side of Christianity wants women to leave the workforce, become submissive to their husbands, be punished for being single, and push out babies. Lots of babies. And I really wish I could end this on a hopeful note, but I can't. Not today. I'm angry. I am outraged, not only because the SAVE Act will mean millions will be denied their constitutional right to vote. I'm angry because of what the world is saying about us. Now, if you don't know who Heather Delaney Reese is, she writes on Substack every day, and you can find her content across social media. She shared something that a creator wrote on Instagram. His name is Martin Bella, and here are his words, quote, "To the people of the United States of America, you realize that you are being seen by the rest of the world as no better than Russia, no better than China. You've threatened Canada, threatened Greenland, invaded Venezuela, and starved Cuba. You've caused untold pain around the world. The Strait of Hormuz and the blocking of oil supplies have brought countries to their knees. Now your president is saying that he's going to make the Strait of Hormuz American territory. Have you people lost touch with reality? While he sits in that chair, the American people are responsible. Go a little further and have a look at the way you are allowing him to treat your sailors. The disrespect he showed the bodies of your servicemen that came back. The way American citizens are being treated on the street. You are allowing it. The people of Iran rose up and thousands of them were killed. You sit back and watch this man prey on the rest of the world. Disgraceful." End quote. His words, we are no better than Russia and China, y'all. Now it is we, even those of us who did not vote for this madness, who are being looked upon as disgraceful and have lost touch with reality. In the words of the young man who was sitting in a dying lake bed, who stood up and screamed, "What the fuck are we doing?" I ask us the same thing. What the fuck are we doing, America? Whatever it is, it should be more than what we are doing in this moment. Some are calling for a revolution, and they are not wrong. As soldiers jump from aircraft carriers because life is unbearable on board. As children go to school hungry because a trillionaire decided their breakfast should be labeled as, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse. As women lay in emergency rooms bleeding out as they miscarry because the staff cannot perform a life-saving abortion for fear of being charged with murder. As Trump and his family become richer and citizens continue to struggle to put food on the table, as strange fruit keeps showing up on our trees across the country, and as human rights are being stripped from the very people whose ancestors fought courageously and valiantly because they believed that good would prevail, a fundamental right for U.S. citizens to vote, for those who would protect those rights, is now at risk. But still, I have hope, because Hungary did it in a voting wave so massive that it was indisputable that the people were done with the inhumanity of their leader, Viktor Orban. America, we too can do this. Voter fraud is rare within the checks and balances systems already in place that ensure U.S. citizens eligible to vote are the ones voting. This is about Christian patriarchy and white supremacy, who will stop at nothing to remain in power. Now I'll close with this. Unfollow me if you must. I truly wish you only the best. But for the sake of humanity and all that is holy, do everything in your power to ensure the SAFE Act does not pass, then for God's sake, vote as if your life depends on it, because it does.